Well, it's Saturday morning. I'm here sitting in my chair. Can't wait for my conversation with my good friend Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. This is the Elder Council. Good morning, Dewey.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm energized. I'm
Well, actually,
energized.
I am too. So
Well,
we can
perfect.
rock today.
Perfect. I got to take the first trip we've had in a year and a half, and went up to see the grandkids and family, and spend time. It was far too brief, not even 48 hours, but it was enough, and it got me thinking about today and talking about family, functional families, dysfunctional families, um, families with young kids, imprinting behavior, and our role as parents in modeling behavior. So there's like 5 hours of stuff to talk about.
Well, that's just the first thought. There's 5 hours for each of those. So, we have about 3 months here, Mark.
Strap in, folks. We're going to be here a while.
Strap in, folks.
What's the first thing you think of when I say family?
Tenderness.
Hmm.
And yeah. And certainly, and that actually comes from two places. One is my relationship with my partner, Kimberly, and the tenderness between us. And the other was a vision of me when I was probably 8-ish.
Mm.
My sister and I were and still are very close. And just the tenderness between us. Just little kids being sweet to each other.
How lovely. I would have enjoyed that.
Well, I did. My sister, in many ways, was one of my saving graces of in my growth process, and has actually helped me very much care and love women, because I had a great relationship with my sister as a dear, dear, dear friend, and it's like, so that gets easily carried over to my relationship with women in general.
What was the family dynamic like?
Well, now we're going to get to the dysfunctional part.
Yeah, we can talk for days. But so you don't have to get into the details, but that's the part that's interesting to me is, and I haven't done a lot of therapy. I've done a tiny bit of therapy on this, but I'm really interested in, as a dad, the responsibility of being a father towards children, and kind of what that means, and what happens when the father ignores that responsibility.
Ignores the responsibility toward children.
Sure. So yes,
his children, or
yep.
In general to the family, which would include his wife or partner.
So we can table the wife and partner for a show more on relationship. I'm really interested in the specifically. I mean, this is a men's group we're working with predominantly, and it's the relationship of the father to the children.
I like that direction. Well, when you first started speaking about that, a few 30 seconds ago or so, my first reaction was I did not learn how to be a man from my father. I learned mostly what I didn't want to do, but I did not learn what I wanted to do. And that's an interesting piece. I was working with a man yesterday who, and we were talking about this very thing. How do you want to be in relationship with your wife, and but more particularly with his children? He has two young girls. And his first reaction was, well, I can tell you what I don't want to do.
Hmm.
And so what I'm wondering about, I mean, and I'd love to hear your perspective of how many men define their role as a man and a father by what they don't want to do versus what they want to do.
That's interesting. I don't have that reaction.
Oh,
I had my dad left when I was 2, so I don't have a relationship with my dad, and I only saw him twice a year until I was 12, and I got to spend about 6 months with him, and then it went back to once a
twice a year.
year. And I talk to him all the time now. He's in his mid 90s, and we have that. But so I don't really have that male role model to look up to,
Or
to
to look up
reflect
to
on.
either way. Oh, that's
Exactly.
interesting.
Exactly. And so, I'm now thinking of like my best friend growing up in those formative years, lived across the street. His dad was just a raging alcoholic. And so I didn't have a good father figure to look at there. So I think we were like feral kids growing up.
Mark Farrell Sylvester, is that
I don't know why that just hit me, but that's kind of, we were the, the misbegotten toys, whatever in our neighborhood. And we were free range kids. My mom was a nurse, so she did shift work. So we were what they now call latchkey kids. And
right?
so pretty much raised ourselves. Thank God I turned out okay. But I'm very specifically now aware of the polarization of attitudes in America, and looking at kids. And I'm really interested very specifically in, when do kids start to exhibit polarized attitude, and when are those kinds of worldviews set? And in talking to an educator yesterday who kind of knows about this stuff pretty deeply,
Mm-hmm.
he said by 4.
Exactly.
And I was like, well, then what the heck chance does that kid have to have a broader worldview if they're coming out of right now we're thinking about, anti-vaccine and anti-this and anti-that, and, they're raised in a home like that. They just don't have a chance, I don't think, of coming up with a different point of view. I kind of cut right to the end of this, but that's what has got me focused. It's like, how many generations is it going to take to where that wears off? Because that constant drip of attitude is just ingrained.
Well, do you want an answer?
I'd love an answer, Doc.
It will take, when and if a change begins, it will take 3 generations for that to become the norm of whatever new family there is. When we make a change in a family system, it takes 3 generations to create what would be called the new norm. So that's one part. So hold that a bit.
Yeah.
Your friend, the educator, is right on. From a developmental perspective, the first year and a half to 2 years of life, and this is a condensed version, so a really big picture. But the first year and a half to 2 years of life, our question and our task as an infant is to figure out if the world's okay. The second-ish 2 years of life is to figure out if I'm okay. So the 2 questions early on are, is the world okay, which is really the core of trust, which would We got the word trust in this
Right,
show
9 minutes.
And but the second is, am I okay? And what that am I okay part is truly about is ultimately the separation of personhood and behavior.
Tell me more about that.
What that is can I throw my oatmeal on the floor and still be loved?
Oh.
So
Is that a conscious thought, or is that our subconscious, which some will tell us is 85% of the brain is the subconscious anyway? Is that the subconscious acting out?
yes and no. There's a combination. Cognitively, we're shifting our cognitive development. Our brain actually takes about 10 to 12 years to fully develop. And up until about 12 years old. And then, well, actually, now we're looking at about till 24 years old. So what's really interesting about it, that really young part, is it's more of a felt sense than it is a cognition.
Got it.
And what we're really trying to figure out is if I do something that you don't like, or if I individuate or from my parent, will I still be loved? Can I be? It's the beginning of being a sovereign human being.
I've never heard that term before, a sovereign human being. I love that.
So what that means, like even between us, Mark, it's like our connection's lovely, our connection's deep, our connection's intimate, and we don't necessarily have to agree on everything. It's like you can have your opinion and your experience, and I can have mine from a place of sovereignty, and it doesn't cause friction between us. It's like, oh yeah, I get this. And it's literally, can I throw my oatmeal on the floor and be loved? And the messages coming in need to be, if I throw my oatmeal on the floor, or if my parent says, hey, sweetie, I love you, and it's not okay to throw your oatmeal on the floor, that's a real different message than if I get the message, bad boy.
Right.
And, or bad girl. Or here's what's even more interesting about this. If I eat my oatmeal and don't throw my oatmeal on the floor, if I get the message, good boy, that's still combining my behavior with who I am.
Oh.
Instead of saying, I love you, sweetie, and good job eating your oatmeal. I love you, and it's not okay to throw your oatmeal on the floor.
So when my mom would say, I love you, but I don't like you right now, is it kind of that? Because I remember that's a very distinctive in my head, that like she was reassuring me that she loved me, but my behavior was not acceptable.
Right. And she probably could have been a little more clear when she said, Mark, I love you, and
I'm gonna go
I don't like your behavior, versus I don't like you. But because that's hard for a kid to separate.
Hence this.
Yeah, I'm sort of going, I wonder what would happen if my partner would say, I love you, but I don't like you. I'd probably laugh at it right now. But.
I think you're correct within the I don't like the behavior. So this is fascinating. This first 2 years, and then the second 2 years, and then what's that third couplet like? So from 4 to 6.
Well, that actually expands from 4 to, it's more like 4 to 6 or 7. It's like, how much can I do? If those two first stages are pretty solid, The world's okay and I'm okay. Then it's like how much it goes to how much I do. And that at the end of that second stage or during that second stage is where we're really beginning to develop language
Mm,
between
mm,
like a year
right.
and a half and 5 years. Um, and language in and of itself, and this is going to go back to all this stuff that you started with, the divisiveness. Um, language is our brains being able to put meaning to symbols.
Oh, oh,
So if we make the sound chair, that's just an arbitrary sound in the world, and everyone points to one of these things we're sitting in, we all go, we learned that we make that sound and that means a chair. That's putting meaning to a sound. In a different language, we might be cita,
mm, mm.
which would be Spanish. And so it's a different sound that means the same thing. So we can be pretty flexible in putting meaning to symbols, because a sound is a symbol for something. That's what language is. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense, and I'm thinking of the child sitting at the dinner table from the time they're sitting in that high chair, right? Or even if they're being breastfed, they're hearing the conversation of mom and dad. So there's this stream of symbols, I like that they don't know what they are yet, and it eventually all that starts to happen.
Right.
And this is where I'm very cognizant of, and I hadn't been until I had this conversation yesterday, that it's kind of the environment is filled with love or hate. And even if it's just them talking about how they hate their job, or they hate this person, or they hate this politician, there's so much invective right now in conversation that there's no way that stops at the dinner table, in my opinion.
That is absolutely correct. We cannot go. So now my mind is going.
That's what Saturdays are for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you are correct. If I'm sitting here going, I hate this and I hate that, and by God this and by God those people, and then I sit down at the dinner table with my children, and I go, we need to really love and care about each other. It's like that doesn't. Kids pick up that incongruency, and I see it with people. I'm around a lot of people with horses, and when I see somebody mistreat a horse and then come over and they're nice to me, I go, I don't trust them. That there's a level of congruency that we need to look at, and also going back to that developmental stage of, am I okay? Part of what happens with kids in that stage is that they have their thought process is still pretty black and white. It's still pretty concrete. It's like, this is good and this is bad. And there's not a lot of fluidity between those polarities. But when we're not able to separate person and behavior, what happens is that we begin hating. So if a person does something or disagrees with us, instead of going, wow, I can't even fathom why that person is saying that. If we're in that early stage, which many people are, a lot of people don't feel like they're okay. A lot of people really struggle with separating personhood and behavior. What, instead of saying, even I hate that behavior, what they'll say is, I hate that person. Because there's no separation.
And are you then suggesting, Doc, that goes back to um, maladjust is not the right word, but goes back to that early, either that first couple of years or the second couple of years, and things, loops weren't closed, things weren't resolved, and it actually it shows up later in life.
Yes. So um, thank you for walking me into that. We, you do that really well. Not only do we develop as an individual, systems also go through developmental stages. So there can be a family system that the whole system is for lack of better word, stuck or has an impasse, and is the world okay? Or the whole system can be stuck or have an impasse, and am I okay? Bigger systems, communities have developmental stages. Cities have developmental stages. Nations have developmental stages.
So I want to stay within the first 2 years. So I'm trying to figure out, is the world okay? And I don't even know I'm trying to figure that out, but that we
Exactly.
know from your empirical evidence that that's what we're doing. And at the same time, in a young family where you have a couple that have been together however long they've been together, either a child early in the relationship or a more planned something maybe a few years in, when there's a strong bond built. Not that time is what does that, but then we insert a young life into the mix, and now is the question for the parents, if this is a system, is the world okay? Are we okay as a family unit now with this? Because it might be financial burdens or not, it might be other kinds of stressors or not, there's sleep, there's all those kinds of things. Like, is the world okay? What did we do? What did we do? And adjusting. And then it's, am I okay? Like, am I okay as a mom? Am I okay as a dad? Because they don't really give you a book on how to figure this out. Now, people will say, well, I learned parenting from Google, but you and I are both from earlier eras where it's just like, whoa. So now we're developing this family system. Am I on track?
Mm-hmm, totally.
Okay. So it feels like some intentionality is required here, knowing that your modeling behavior, your behavior is being watched 24/7 by these young eyes. And you have an opportunity to model that behavior. A person way smarter than me a long time ago explained to me how important it was that I manage my own state, how I show up, because that is profoundly impacts everyone around me. And which is why I learned very early on to always show up in a good mood. If I show up in a good mood, everybody's going to be in a good mood, even if things are not so good. Showing up, that's important. So I think that state management, maybe this is really what this is about, around your children is I want to say life changing. And I thought I might want to soften that word, but I don't think I do. I think you are forming that life, that worldview, that person, that rest of their life is profoundly impacted by your state of physicality and your state of mind, because you're there, you're the dad, you're the mom. Or am I overstating?
No, in fact, if you're stating it strongly, and what I would say is, feel free to state it even more strongly. Energetically, when we come in, and this is a really big deal, I think, and a really big deal for men, is many of us have really big energy.
Yes.
Many of us are really big people. Many times, we as men are the biggest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but many times. The energy that we give off, which is the state that you're talking about, is picked up somatically by everyone around us, and is picked up most particularly by the infants around us, and even in utero. There's
Really?
huge evidence that that our energy is picked up in utero by the fetus. And if anyone really wants to go look at this, a guy named Bruce Lipton has done tons of study on this. And in fact, his studies show that the energy that gets picked up by infants in utero affect what genes and what genetic material gets turned on and off. So we're not just talking behavior here. We're literally talking how affecting us at the core of our nervous systems. And so what you just stated is huge. And if you as a dad walk into the room and you're calm and you're grounded and you come in a good mood and you come in with either neutral or an optimistic perspective, that will be picked up by both the mother of your child and by your child.
So I need to marinate on that for a little bit, because I just remember very specifically playing music for the fetus.
That is
Very
so cool.
Specifically. However, I want to kind of come back to the environmental energy. I'm going to call it that. That energy that is, in the home, and couple that with the 3 generations to change. I had a guy on my show, Dr. Keith Witt, another, a wonderful man like yourself, who's got, a lifetime of experience and tens of thousands of hours of working on these problems. And we were talking specifically about the impact of COVID on the family dynamic. And he was saying that, and we were looking at violence in the home as a result of lost the job, lost liberty, lost freedom, lost, maybe it wasn't a great family dynamic anyway. So now we've put that into a pressure cooker, and there are stories that will be told over the years of things there, and kids as a part of that. He's saying it was going to take 2 to 3 generations for that to wear off. So
absolutely,
is it fair to say then that this past 2 years, this will be 2 years before we blink our eyes, we will have this COVID generation, and think of the kids who were born at the beginning of this through the first 2 years of their life? Is the world okay? What's the answer they're going to get? It's going to, who knows?
Well, obviously, yes, I think you were going to say it depends, and you're right. The word fear keeps coming up inside me. And mostly where that's coming from is the imagination. I mean, what's happening is, it's like, if I had an infant right now, I'd be scared to death.
Yeah.
And because I wouldn't know what the future would hold. Could I take my baby to the store and in my shopping cart? Could I, or even in the snuggly, what's going to happen with school? What's going to happen with all of those pieces? And this is going to wrap around where we first started with all the angst and the polarities of
Hmm.
wear mask, don't wear mask, all of that. If we really think about what's behind that most of the time, and some people will say all the time, but I don't believe all the time. Most of the time when we walk with that level of anger and angst, it's what's underneath that is fear.
So if as adults, because we're talking about the adults living in this in subconscious fear, right? Subconscious fear, that's going to bleed out at home. It's going to bleed out
at
all
home.
over.
It's going to bleed into what's called our neuroceptive system.
Yep.
And
we've talked about that. And with my new athletic project, I'm very, very tuned into the subconscious impact on an athlete's performance.
Absolutely.
and ways to measure that. So that's another show we're going to do, Doc. So I want to fast forward a little bit to Thanksgiving 20 years ago. Sitting with my son. No, it wasn't 20 years ago. It was 12 years ago, because my grandson is 14 and he was 2, and it was a Thanksgiving up at their home. And I was sitting far across the room, and he was sitting with his son. And I don't remember what the occasion was, but they were right together. And I thought, and it was a lovely moment. And I thought, he's going to be a great dad. And I gave myself a little attaboy. It's like, I frequently joke with my kids that thank God they turned out okay, because they were raised by wolves for sure. Remember, I'm the feral teenager. The fact that they did come out okay was and I think about that, and that crossed my mind. It was a very, very strong imprinted memory for me, to be able to see them just this last weekend. They're not set in stone, but they're pretty set. At 15 and 12, thinking, just loving how loving that family is.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very loving, and contrasted that with mine, which didn't have that at all. And I'm thinking, okay, the generational change. So now those boys grew up in that environment. That's going to have a powerful impact on their parenting skills. And there's going to be, and it might just be one. Okay, so if I'm one generation, my son's second generation, then they're the third generation where it's pure love. One hopes.
So, first of all, you deserve more than an attaboy. You deserve a big fucking hug and pat on the back.
There you go. I'll do that.
I'm serious. I am serious as hell, because I know you, and I know the kind of love that you give, and the kind of love that you're willing to give, and also the kind of growth that you're willing to seek.
Thank you.
Which is, we can make mistakes as parents.
Yeah.
That in fact, we will make mistakes as parents. That mistake is not the issue. The mistake, the issue would be is if we make a mistake and we don't try and do anything about it.
Right. Exactly. We're fallible. We are human, and it's it's the word resiliency comes to mind, and that wasn't a word I ever would have associated with parenting. But if you have a healthy system, that healthy system for me is great nutrition, great fitness, and great wellness, the three legs of that stool. And if I apply that to parenting, when that's balanced and you get good sleep and all the kinds of stuff, then when you make that mistake, you're kind of like, who, how many parents, here's a good one, how many parents go up after a mistake and they know, who, I blew that one, that was a bad choice, and apologize to their kid and turn it into a teaching moment.
Not enough.
Yeah, that's it. Not enough. So I would challenge our listener right now this week, if they've got young kids at home, they get any kids at home, they have to be young, and you make a mistake because a doc said you will, figure out a way to apologize, but turn it into a teaching moment. On the dojo, we were on the mat. If I'm doing a backhand, and if I accidentally clipped you, I would say, I'm sorry. Grandmaster would stop the whole class. You're not allowed to say you're sorry. Change your behavior.
Right.
Don't do it again. However, I think in interpersonal relationships, and we may have talked about it, saying you're sorry is pretty important. But I think as a parent, there's an opportunity to turn that into a bit of a teaching moment, so the child learns, hey, people make mistakes, and then people change the behavior and they apologize. And I'm curious, because we've talked about apology before, remind our listener, what would be the right way for that parent to apologize to the child?
You are so right on about so many things there. What I encourage people to do is ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
If I were in a dojo with you and I would say, and I would clip your face, I'd say, would you forgive me for clipping your face?
Yeah. They're now, okay. So in that instance, it's two adults, but if it's an adult and a 6-year-old, how does the 6-year-old have the emotional capacity or the cognitive capacity to understand what's going on?
Not fully. And we can still, so a big part of what we're talking about here is what kids pick up energetically.
Right.
So if
The
I'm sitting
somatic
down,
nature, right?
the somatic nature,
Yeah.
the felt sense, the gut piece that many of us as adults have been taught to ignore. So let's try not to
Let's
do that one.
ignore all the signals your body is sending you, please. It's trying to
Yeah.
help you out, but no, I'm not paying attention.
Right. So when we make amends to our children, the energy with which we do that is more important than the words that we say.
Okay.
And a little kid can know, a 6-year-old, it's not that hard to get down on a knee. So you're looking your little person in the eye and saying, I blew it, kiddo. Would you forgive me? Is it okay to?
They'll feel that. I feel that right now.
Yeah, they'll feel that. It'll take that long. So I blew it, kiddo. Will you forgive me? I'm going to try not to do that again.
And so if I'm in that room as a silent observer and I watch the mom see that interaction with the dad and the child, does my love just start to burst for that dad right then?
You bet.
Yeah.
And here's the coolest part about it. When that happens, what's going to happen is that little 6-year-old's going to come. They're going to make a mistake, or they, you know, they'll do whatever they do and they'll make a mistake and they'll come trotting up to you and they'll go, I blew it, Daddy. Will you forgive me?
Mm.
And then what do you think the dad's going to do? And
Melt.
the mom.
I would melt.
They're going to melt onto the ground. And the world's going to be okay. And they're going to be okay.
And you reassure them and hug them and yeah.
And then 3 minutes later, you're laughing and giggling and playing in the mud or whatever you're doing.
The initial questions we started off with, which the first two questions we have in life, there's probably more, but the two important ones is the world okay? That's the primary.
Mm-hmm.
And then if yes, then second question, am I okay?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like those two questions don't go away.
They never go away. They don't go away on both a big picture and on a smaller picture, and they're continual. And when I talk about this, we have to eat every day. We have to nourish ourselves every day. There's no difference between that and nourishing is the world okay every day. There's no difference between nourishing ourselves every day on am I okay? Relationally, with our partners, with our friends, with those people that we love, it's a daily piece. And so what we're trying to do is build a foundation, but also every day we need to nourish that. The same as we nourish our bodies with food.
Which takes us back, and this might be where we end, is when we wake up. I'm imagining that baby waking up and looking around and going, is the world okay? Yeah, everything looks the same as when I went to sleep. Okay, world's okay. Am I okay? You know, maybe a little gassy, but I'm okay.
But I'm okay.
But I'm okay. And I'm thinking of just myself when I wake up. I'm like, is everything okay? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that happens faster. And then am I okay? How do I feel? I feel pretty good. And we kind of always, each time we open our eyes, it's a situational awareness. And I've got to think that the underlying fear that COVID has brought on every aspect of humanity is the world okay? The question has frequently been not so much.
That is accurate. So then if an infant wakes up and they're not okay, what helps them become okay?
Well, I think the parent.
Right. The relationship between the child and the parent.
Yes, the relationship.
When we wake up and ask the question is, with COVID streaming through every aspect of every country and every place in the world, is the world okay? What will make that okay is the relationships that we have with people.
And we exacerbated that exact thing with so many people living solo lives and not able to have a relationship to enrobe them and comfort them, and they flailed. And I think the issues and the impact of that at the individual level is yet to be seen.
That is accurate. The likelihood that in 20 years from now, the babies now that aren't getting what they need, when they become parents, they're going to really struggle with helping their babies know that the world's okay.
in 20 years, let's do another show on that, my friend.
Sounds good.
I let's leave some hope and optimism out there for our parents and men and women, whoever listens to this, on what could they do today, knowing what they've just learned in this last bit of time. What could they do today? What one next action could they take to make their situation better?
Relationship and connection is what heals.
There you go.
Go spend time with, yeah, exactly. There we go.
And let's say it again, because, and I want everybody to write this down: relationship and connection
Is what heals.
is what heals. My dear friend, this was just another spectacular conversation, and I just feel blessed that I get to have this with you.
Thank you, and you're welcome, and I'm so honored. I am so honored, I can't tell you.